Well, how do you do? We're live, and it's the Bradley J. Show, and this is a great thing on this 4th of July weekend. It's the triumphant return of my man in D.C., Joe Mathieu. Hi, Joe.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's Bradley J.
Hey. So
Hey, good to see you. Where are you? You look like you're somewhere fun.
I'm in my broadcast studio
Yeah, but
here.
that's an undisclosed location, right?
That is an undisclosed location. I'm going to be honest with you and say that it's a virtual background.
Hmm.
It's not real. I pride myself on making my backgrounds look real,
I had a feeling, but yes, you do look like you're actually there.
and this is actually a bar in Belgrade, in
Excellent.
Serbia.
I was doing like the virtual background, and then I was doing like the fuzzy background,
Yeah,
and I just gave up on all the backgrounds.
you did. Why'd you give up?
I don't know. I feel like that's so COVID for me. Whatever rat trap room I'm in is what you see.
All right, maybe
It's
that's the
funny
way to
actually at
go.
Bloomberg where I work now. If you're doing a live shot at home, like if there's breaking news, you got to use Zoom. They,
Yeah.
they you can't. No effects are allowed. So I abandoned the whole thing.
And is this the background you use for Bloomberg, or do you use a work background?
From time to time, this is my little home office that I'm in. So that it may well end up being here, or maybe I'll find something better looking if I have a little warning. But I had to give you the real thing, man. This is where I work.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I am. I pay attention to the backgrounds of people who are guests on the news, and surprised sometimes at their lack of caring about their background. They'll be in like a closet. It's
Yes, it's
a
amazing.
federal government official just with a
Right.
stupid background, and I'm amazed at that. It's like,
I've
come
become
on,
very
man.
sensitive to this, being in television, where a lot of times your guests are not in Washington, certainly not in studio. We have cameras at the White House and on the Hill, and we try to get our people there if they're not going to come in. But if you have a lawmaker who's at home, or a doctor who an expert of some sort, an economist, not everybody's back to work yet. And it's amazing to me the lengths to which some people will go to have a great background.
Yeah.
And to your point, those who just couldn't care less. But I will tell you that I think at the moment for a lawmaker, I think your own Seth Moulton on the North Shore is leading. He's winning the day at his home in Salem. Everybody comments on it. It's so well lit. It looks great. He's got foliage behind it. It's a beautiful thing.
Good. And of course, if someone's written a book, it's always just kind of in the view, in the background.
That's
And
right.
and if you're a lawyer, you have all these legal books to give yourself credibility. So people always ask, "What's Joe Mathieu doing?" And you're at Bloomberg. Give me a day in the life of Joe Mathieu, and tell me about Bloomberg and what kind of angle, what is their angle, man?
Luckily their angle is right down the middle, which I like. There's no kind of partisan stuff, despite people think Bloomberg and it's like conservative Wall Street stuff, but it's really the most down the middle newsroom I've worked in, and the resources are just enormous. I mean, we're on in 127 countries. We have bureaus in that many different places, so it's a real global reach. And it's funny, I think more people know us from, certainly on the TV side, in Europe and the Middle East than people here in the U.S. do, just based on our coverage and the way this all works. But I cover Washington, so I'm a little bit of a unicorn at Bloomberg, since most people are covering the markets or finance or certain sectors of corporate America. And I cover, basically the White House and the Capitol and the campaign trail. And I have part of a great team, a growing team actually in D.C. And I'm hosting and co-hosting a couple of shows now. So I do a radio program from 1 to 3 p.m. every day on the Bloomberg network. So it airs on satellite radio as well, and you can hear it on local stations in certainly in Boston and other cities. And then I co-anchor a television program on Bloomberg TV from 5 to 6 p.m. And so between those two shows and like the many meetings that surround them, I'm basically chained to the bureau for most of my day.
Is it fun being a co-anchor on TV?
Yeah, it's been a riot. I've never done anything like it. You and I have both co-hosted a lot of things on the radio. It's not that different, but it's just a different kind of. It's the part that is different is kind of the bullpen and the level of hosts or guests rather that you get on TV. Kind of change the dynamic. It's not the same as radio. You'll get 5 minutes with a lawmaker, and it's like you're going into like the boxing ring with a strategy, and you've got your follow-ups ready because your time is going to be so tight. and they work that way too because that's how they are in hearings. They've got 5 minutes to get on TV or get a soundbite out there or get the answer that they need. So everyone's very efficient with their time and very good at what they do, and things move really fast.
Yeah, usually you have different agendas. I mean, many times you have your questions that you want answers to. They have their message they want to get out.
Yeah.
How often does it match up? How often do you ask A and they answer B?
Always. It never matches up.
And then, so the tendency for me to being a rookie would be like to make them answer my question, but you don't, do you? You just say, I asked the question, you let it go, you move, you might ask one hint of a follow up. Can you answer that? But you don't really press it, right?
Well, it depends. Some things you have to press. Sometimes though, you've got other things you need to get to. So, that there's likely, if this is going to be a really hard question, there's probably going to be a dodge, and usually what the answer is going to be. I mean, there's something to the art of interviewing where you usually don't ask questions that you don't actually know the answer to. It's kind of interesting how that goes, and they know what you're going to ask them. And sometimes you got to keep hammering it, just for the benefit of your listener or your viewer. But Tim Russert, the great late Tim Russert, I thought was perfect he always said, you ask the question, you follow up, you acknowledge that they did not answer the question, and then move on. And that's because, all of a sudden you've been hitting them on the same question for 5 minutes and the interview's over. So, you have to be a little bit more balanced in things.
Oh, look who it is.
And this in social media, people will crush you if you don't get an answer to questions. They want you to dog these guys. And so it's really been, it's been informed by the viewer more than ever. And they kind of rate interviewers on their aggressiveness, which I don't think is always a good thing.
Yeah. You have to kind of try to get an answer, but you also need to entertain. If it becomes too boring, you hammering down, somebody's going to turn the channel.
And conversely, if it becomes performative, just like lawmakers do in hearings, when you're a jerk and you keep hammering the same thing over and over again, like now you clearly have an agenda beyond getting as much information as you can out of that person.
So you were the boss of yourself on the radio. Do you have producers and bosses breathing down on you, watching you in your ear, maybe saying, ask this question? Do you have to worry about your boss a little bit?
Not so much that, and I do have a couple producers on the radio show as well. You know what that's like, though. Radio producing is a little bit different. You tend to your point, you kind of own the interview. Like they'll book the interview, set up the segment, but it's your real estate. It's a little bit different on TV also because I'm co-anchoring. So, I'm strategizing with another person on how to do this. And we don't always have an exact idea of what the other person wants to do, but we're good looking out for each other's space and not overlapping, maybe following up on your co-anchor's answer or question if they didn't get an answer. But I do have, I'm lucky to have producers who like to brainstorm before these. And that's what's fun, actually. And you do get reminders, I'll have my chat up in front of me and reminders on some of the things we talked about, or, hey, is it a good time to pivot to this? But it's never an overbearing sort of mandate to ask something.
Now, on a more personal note, no one throws a party like Joe Mathieu. Let me tell you, folks, when Joe Mathieu throws a party, it is an extravaganza of fancy foods and cool cocktails.
And it's fireworks season again, bro.
Well, yeah. So I want to know first if you're going to have a party, because that's what you do, but you're a busy man. And secondly, if you do have a party, will there be fireworks?
Well, we just did last weekend. We did that party.
Okay.
I only provided sparklers, I want you to know. And because there were some kids there and, I didn't think it would be a good night to have the police over. But now that I live in Virginia, I mean, this is the other, it's basically like moving to New Hampshire from Massachusetts. All of a sudden, everything is legal. And when I go to the 7-Eleven, there's a big trailer in the parking lot just selling fireworks. There are fireworks stands everywhere. And I do feel this year like I need to get out of my New England shell and blow up some really loud stuff this weekend.
Can you actually buy firecrackers, or do they just have things that go squizzling off? Can you get black cats, black bats, M80s?
Yes. I'm here to tell you yes. I don't think Fairfax County, where I live, loves that, but in the state of Virginia, it's a big yes, and that means they're everywhere. Roman candles, like the real stuff. Yeah, blackjacks, exactly. That's kind of what I was thinking of.
Man, there was this guy named Wayne. I won't give his last name. up in New Hampshire. So I don't know where he went to get fireworks, but they were like gold. Hey, can I get a pack of those? And you light them off very carefully, one at a time. Put one in a pipe. Put one over here. Anyway, now news-wise, what are you hearing about Jack Smith's ongoing investigation? I'm sure that's got to be big for you.
Yeah, God, we've had to be read into so many stories. This is such a wild time to be covering Washington. I mean, one day you're doing a piece of inflation legislation, the next day you're doing high crimes and misdemeanors. Is the campaign. We got the first of the two cases here in the classified documents indictment. January 6th is coming, and so is Fulton County out of Georgia. And it's entirely likely that Donald Trump will be carrying 4 indictments by the time he is, walking into primaries, which is absolutely remarkable to think. They just interviewed Brad Raffensperger, who I've talked to a number of times, the Secretary of State in Georgia. They interviewed him here in the special counsel case. So this is still active right now. And there's a lot of talk about Georgia landing in August, and then the special counsel shortly thereafter, maybe even the end of this year, beginning of next, but it could be sooner than that.
And part of the holding off is they're talking to people like Giuliani, et cetera, trying to get them to flip, you figure?
Well, yeah, and I mean, this is a big case. They're interviewing hundreds of people. There's so many hours, as you know, hundreds of hours of security footage. And it's a real task to connect the dots on this. If you ask the impeachment managers, if you look at the case in Georgia, these things take their time, and he's on no timeline. And I'm not sure that now that they just dropped the most recent indictment, he's probably not in a huge hurry to follow it up with another one, because there's the alternate view is that this is weaponizing the Justice Department, and they're just throwing everything they can at him, and none of it's real. And who knows if he's motivated by that? That's the point of a special counsel. We have no idea what's going through his head.
And this particular Justice Department seems pretty good at keeping secret.
They've actually kept things pretty tight. Although you heard that recording,
yeah.
That was pretty significant. That was already in writing, but to hear that tape of him, flipping through, and I mean, like we work in radio where sound effects are great. I mean, could they have had better sound? All these papers, sounds like he's rolling in papers and like there's all these papers everywhere, flying in the air, and they're laughing. He's ordering Cokes. I mean, that was an incredible moment to think.
And it's key to know whether, when they talk to the people who were in the room, did he show you these things or not? Mm-hmm. Like he said, look. Yeah, did he turn the paper around so you could see?
But also indicating that he once had the ability to declassify and no longer does. All of that was pretty interesting. So they already had that in writing, but for that to leak in audio form, that's the type of thing that might start to dent public opinion on this, because it sure hasn't anywhere yet in a poll. All he has done is widen a monstrous lead, an already monstrous lead over Ron DeSantis. Mm-hmm. I just think back to where we were when we went to Ernie Bach's house.
Yeah.
What was it, 2015? And I'll step out of the frame for 1 second, because I grabbed this just the other day, Bradley J. I found this.
Oh, my God.
The press pass where Bradley J. first talked to Donald Trump, I'll have you know.
And so did you.
I shared a podium with him.
Yeah. I asked him,
like a joke at that point. That's when everybody was still laughing and nobody actually thought he could become president. And imagine how far we've come from that moment.
Yeah.
It blows my mind.
That was also the first time I'd ever seen a drone being used. Remember, there was a drone over the crowd.
It was stationary all night.
And Donald Trump was late coming in from New York, and the press from all over the world was at Ernie Bach's house, lined up in the back. And Trump came rushing in, and everybody asked him questions. I asked him a very safe question. Do you have a campaign song yet, Donald? I don't know. I didn't want to make a mistake, but I did want to get credit for it.
Got good answers to our questions. I asked him about Steve Wynn, who at that time was on the ropes of trying to build this casino in Everett, up against, I guess it was the Mohegan Sun or something. And he was like, "Oh, he's a great friend of mine. Definitely, you want Steve Wynn." And that was right before the whole scandal came out. But whatever.
All right. I know we don't have a lot of time. I don't want to keep you so long. You never want to do this again. But the other day we chatted over a beer, and I said, I gave you my theory, my hope, kind of a theory, that neither Donald Trump nor Ron DeSantis will be the nominee. And that sounds insane at this time. Would I take an even bet and spend money on that? No. But if somebody gave me some kind of odds, I would. And I just see Donald Trump so high in the polls because because of his name recognition. There's nobody that they feel is big enough to beat Biden. But I feel like there are so many uncertainties with the former president that anything could happen and probably will happen. There are so many things flying around that could go wrong for him. Hey, and DeSantis is such a dud, so boring, such a petulant child with counterproductive, petty little squabbles with people like the state's biggest employer. He's known as his image is of a book banner, like somebody trying to create a Handmaid's Tale world. And I don't think that's going to fly with them either. And the most recent marijuana thing, where he doesn't even want marijuana in recovery places. 88% of the American people favor medical marijuana. How is that going to help him? I don't get it. Your turn.
I'm just thinking how much I miss. Sorry, Jay talking. Look, we just don't know. When you go back to 2015, so around that time we went to Ernie Bach's house, or in the months preceding. At that point, Jeb Bush was leading the polls, followed by, I think, Scott Walker. Donald Trump was down around 4 or 5% or something. So it's just smart to not assume that this is going to stay where it is. On the other hand, you have this sort of unicorn scenario where he's an incumbent even though he's not in office right now. And as long as this MAGA 30-35% exists, it's going to be really difficult for anyone else to win a primary. Now, I'm not saying that no one else can beat Donald Trump, and it's unclear or Joe Biden rather, it's unclear how that would play. I don't really buy any of these hypotheticals in the general election right now because it's so early and they're national polls and people aren't paying attention. But there was a really interesting one that I'll throw at you here, and this is not a very good answer to your question, but Morning Consult had a new poll out this week, and it had second choices in it. This was taken after the indictment dropped. It showed Donald Trump far and beyond, 57% to Ron DeSantis somewhere in the 20s. But when you went to second choices, almost like you're in a caucus, imagine Donald Trump is taken out of the race for one reason or the other, and it's not an extreme idea to consider that happening, considering his legal issues. Ron DeSantis was the top second choice at 20-something%, followed by Mike Pence at 17% over everyone else in the field. Nikki Haley, Chris Christie, Ramaswamy, Will Hurd, anyone else who's gotten in this thing, Asa Hutchinson. And I thought that was pretty interesting. And it really shows us, because I don't believe that Mike Pence has a clear path to this nomination. I'm not sure anybody could really foresee that.
Everybody hates him.
How much noise there is in the numbers. And I'm just not sure I believe a lot of polling right now.
Well, that's good to hear. Now, I was thrilled to see Chris Christie get in there, if nothing else, for entertainment's sake. I want to see him on a debate stage. I think he's going to make it.
Yep.
If I were some sort of organization or a broadcast organization, I would certainly want him on that stage because that's gonna make it more interesting.
Absolutely.
And what do you have to get?
Problem with this debate in August, though, at the moment, unless the RNC changes its rules, you're going to have probably 3 people on the stage. Donald Trump isn't going now because of that. Ron DeSantis says he's probably not going. Those are the only really 2 sure thing candidates to get on the stage. But if you look at the criteria that changed this year from the last campaign, the number of individual donors that you need, the poll ratings that you need, and the level of cash that you need to get on the stage prohibit just about anybody else from getting up there. So if the 2 front runners aren't going to go and you end up with like 3 people, Mike Pence, Nikki Haley, and somebody, they need to rethink the criteria because they're also requiring candidates to take a pledge that they will support the Republican nominee. And half the field has already said it won't do that. So this is starting to look like either a total dud of a debate that might need to be canceled or something has to change between now and then.
So here's a question. If you're ever for Chris Christie, would you, Chris or Governor Christie, would you take a pledge to either pardon Donald Trump or to not pardon Donald Trump? You could ask it either way you wanted. What do you think he would say? What do you think he will say when presented with that question?
if he hasn't already been asked, he will not pardon Donald Trump, and he's also said that he will not support Donald Trump as the nominee because he's not fit for president. So this is why they can't get on stage together. I'm not sure who breaks this whole thing, but it could also be, like, remember, Trump's really smart at this stuff. He's either going to schedule a competing event that night that'll be sponsored by UFC or something, and have a cage match. I don't know who, or he'll show up at the last minute, try to Bigfoot the whole thing, and turn it into an event. He will capitalize on that Milwaukee debate in August, whether he shows up or not.
That is interesting stuff. Every cycle they say this is the most important election of our lifetime.
Right.
And maybe this one is. I don't know, because what would an angry, vindictive Donald Trump back in the White House look like? Would he even try to govern, or would he spend all his time getting even with his enemies?
Well, he's promised to clear out the bureaucracy. I think you would see sweeping firings in federal agencies, and after knowing, he liked having a lot of acting directors around and not ever letting anyone be confirmed in their role after the first generation of staff, that I think it would just be a very temporary feeling around here. A lot of federal workers being fired, which a lot of Americans would love to see. Maybe the disbanding or defunding of certain agencies like the FBI, the IRS, and then a lot of acting chiefs, I suspect, in the government. It wasn't that long ago, but we do forget what it was like.
All right. Well, I don't want to keep you too long. Is there anything else that you'd like to chat about?
Just wondering how you're doing. I don't always get to see people who used to enjoy the crossover back in the good old days. Would be glad to know that you just, as you mentioned, we met for a drink for the first time in over 2 years recently.
Yeah,
which was really cool to see you. And I'm
just glad
Boston still gets to have Bradley J, because I'll tell you, I moved back up there when we started working together. That was 12 years ago. Think of how much the media market has changed since then, and just the whole media in general it's been a shocking evolution in a lot of ways.
So I knew you were going, you are soon to go to New Orleans. Tell me about that trip.
Yeah.
You're a giant fan of New Orleans. You turned me on to some places. I've stayed at the Richelieu,
yes,
upon your recommendation. Yeah. And so tell me about your upcoming trip down there.
You sent me to the Candlelight Lounge. We've always had New Orleans in common because it's just the most exotic American city. It's like going to Europe without leaving the country. And I'm crazy enough to be going in August this year.
Whoa.
It's going to be even hotter and sweatier than DC, but there's also something great about it when you're there. I don't know, something perfect about it. But it's not a big deal. We're just going down for a long weekend. I try to go once a year when I can. And if I ever miss it, I really start, you start thinking like, man, I haven't been in New Orleans. I got to there's something about just something in the air. I don't know what it is. And certainly the food. But we'll be down doing our thing. You end up getting a routine. As you know, you start at Napoleon House, then you go up to Frenchman Street at night.
Everybody has their different routine.
Yes.
I started Arnaud's.
Oh, yeah.
And at French 75 and although I don't get a French 75.
One of the greatest bars in the country.
I get something else. And then I'll go to, what is it? Well, not in this order, but I do hit Clover, that breakfast place, etc. But Frenchman Street is where we,
that's
overlap.
Yeah,
where
that's
we
where the
interface.
jam is now. It's not Bourbon Street. And people should know that Bradley J going to that place, French 75 at Arnaud's, this is not like Bradley hanging out at some ramshackle bar on Bourbon Street with hurricane. This is the most sophisticated bar in that part of the country where the gentlemen wear white dinner jackets instead of their traditional tuxedos as they mix you drinks.
Let's finish up with the perfect time to remind people of the story that, if you knew, you might have forgotten. Joe Mathieu, as a teen, actually was hauled up on stage because the dude who was in the band somehow looked at Joe Mathieu and said, "You're a guitar player. I know you are. Come up here on stage, you 17-year-old kid, and I'm gonna go to the bar and you take over for me for a while." Tell that story again.
That was a ramshackle bar, by the way. That doesn't exist anymore. You know how like all the bars on Bourbon Street, they have garage doors you can pull down in front of the thing. That's what they do at night. They just close. They shut the whole. It was one of those. So you go back the next morning and you can't find it, kind of thing. But yes, it was EJ and the Electric Blues Band. And to this day, this would have been like mid to late 80s, I guess. To this day, I have never heard anyone play Hendrix style guitar the way he had it that night. He had an old fashioned American made Sunburst Strat going into a basement that was turned up so loud that you had the natural feedback. And I don't even know how they allowed this to happen. Nobody could talk in this place. And to be handed that rocket ship, you know, to hold on to this thing was like the most fun I ever had in my life. And I ended up going back to play 4 nights. We had so much fun. But it's only because I went up and introduced myself to him. Like, that's the most amazing Jimmy guitar I ever heard in my life. And he said, "You're a guitar player?" I said, "Yeah, you come up in the next set." And I thought he was kidding, but sure enough, they pulled me up there.
That's bizarre. How would he know that you would be good enough to be on the stage, right? How would he know that? Or did he care?
Because look, man, this was not a high-end bar. And he knew that there'd be some tips coming from the people I was with. That's how this stuff works,
I see.
right?
I see. But he had you back 3 more nights.
I went back there the rest of the time that I was there, because, you know, it was kind of a riot to have somebody who looked like me playing with a band that looked like them. And, we were a bit of a novelty act, but we also just had a lot of fun. I hung out with him in between sets. EJ was a philosopher and a great influence on me as a young kid. I wish I could have talked to him again someday.
How old again were you?
I was 17 years old. I thought he was an old guy. He was probably 23 years old or something, Bradley. Who knows? Big headed dreads. He was the coolest guy.
And you have a cool family that actually took you there. The fact you actually were there at all says a lot about your family. You'd go on these big road trips, right?
Yeah, my dad was working. My dad is a big jazz fan and big New Orleans fan, and he started doing as an illustrator and started doing a lot of album covers for bands down there. So our family would end up going. We would go with him a lot, whether we go into Lafayette or Homa, some real, way out of the way places, because he was doing a lot of Cajun bands along with jazz bands, and we got to know the area pretty well. If it weren't for that, I wouldn't know anything about any of this stuff. That's just, I guess that's the way life works. I don't know how maybe you had a friend bring you there or something, but it's certainly not, if you're growing up in New England, somewhere you go every weekend.
All right, well, I want to not stay with you too long, because I want you to feel good about coming back on again. Please make sure when you come back, you have all your fingers and none of them get blown off by your fireworks that you're going to get.
Yeah,
that would be so sad. You showing up next time with a bandaged.
Wouldn't that be pathetic? But then you could do a little before and after video, and it would be pretty good for Facebook. I feel.
It would be pathetic, especially since I have warned you now.
Exactly. I came back with the big bandage on my hand.
Right.
Yeah, listen. So next time, I want to hear about. We didn't talk about music at all, because that's another big thing we have in common. We haven't collaborated on anything, but I do love what you're up to right now, and I'd love to hear more about it. We'll compare notes on the music stuff.
Oh, also, there's a little bit of more news. You remember Dave Hurley from O Positive? O Positive was a band around when you were there. I'm collaborating with him now.
How about that?
We went down to the Cape, and
is this for recording or live or both?
I guess it's probably going to be for recording.
If there's a gig, I'm coming up.
Okay, great. Ladies and gentlemen, the great Joe Mathieu. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Bradley J.
Have a good weekend. Bye, all. We'll be unlive in like 5 seconds.